Hi, let's have a little look at this newspaper, this online ABC TV Australia article about circumcision rite in the Northern Territory, ending with 3 boys airlifted to hospital. I wonder what Elizabeth Broderick, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, would say about boys ending up in a pool of blood after a circumcision rite, when if you make one little pinprick in a girl and draw one little infinitesimally small drop of blood, you'll be jailed, and if you're found guilty, and you'll be put on the sex offenders register for life. But anyway, this is from ABC TV Online, 22nd of the 1st, 14. Anger in Northern Territory community after circumcision rite ends with 3 boys airlifted to hospital, by Norman Hermont and Alison McClimate. Video. Aboriginal initiation ceremony divides opinion in remote town. So it's a remote town in the Northern Territory, and opinion is divided about whether the initiation ceremony, the genital cutting ceremony, is a good idea. There's a photo of a boy, one of the boys, or young men. This article, interestingly, uses young men and boys interchangeably, but it would appear that they were all under the age of consent, under age 18 at least. That's interesting. There is still anger in a remote Northern Territory community after 3 teenage boys had to be medically evacuated following an Indigenous initiation ceremony which went horribly wrong. Now, before I go on and get accused of being culturally insensitive, this video is basically about sex discrimination and the sex discrimination as far as the genital cutting laws in Australia are concerned. The boys were part of a group of around 20 who were circumcised. Now, is that clear that they were circumcised, or were they sub-incised? Circumcised 2 days before Christmas near the small Gulf of Carpentaria town of Borroloola, 700 kilometres east of Darwin. Yes. They had to be medically evacuated following, the ceremony, which went horribly wrong. They were so badly cut during the procedure that they had to be medically evacuated to Darwin for urgent treatment. And remember, if you cut a little girl, you go off to jail if you draw 1 drop of blood. Local ambulance driver William Miller arrived at the ceremony to find his 17-year-old grandson Bryce severely injured. That is the boy who, about whom there's a picture. He was severely injured. Now, that could read severely genitally injured. He was severely genitally injured, let's say. I took one look at him and he was sitting in a pool of blood, and that really hurt me, that did, he said. This is the boy's grandfather, found him sitting in a pool of blood. That's a pool of blood. And remember, 1 pinprick, 1 tiny drop of blood done to a girl will send you to jail. I call that, there's some problem there for me with the sex discrimination laws. Do it to a little girl, you go to jail. Do it to a little boy, and you're allowed to do it to a little boy. And the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Eliza Broderick, wouldn't bat an eyelid about these boys sitting in a pool of blood. You'll find that she hasn't made any comment. I doubt that she's made any comment. I doubt that she will make a comment about it. I wasn't happy at all with the whole people who'd done the job, said the grandfather. Bryce Miller, this is the boy, the grandson, who had to be airlifted to hospital, had pushed his grandfather to allow him to participate in the ceremony. So it's an Indigenous ceremony, possibly called secret men's business, although this isn't a secret because this is all over the newspapers, isn't it? When I got cut and I seen the blood squirting through on the wrong side, it was bad. Squirting out bad, heaps, and losing a lot of blood, he said. And what did we say about a little girl, a drop of blood, and a little girl, and a drop of blood? What did Julia Gillard say? She said, there is no place, something to the effect of, there is no place in any religion or culture for female genital mutilation. That doesn't sound super culturally sensitive, does it? She said, there's no place in any religion or culture for female genital mutilation. She tweeted that. And so what did the Coptic Christian women who practice female genital cutting think of that? What did the Islamic women who practice female genital cutting think of that? That might have been culturally insensitive for them to say that about their culture and their religion. The ABC understands instruments from the local health clinic were used in the ceremony and have regularly been supplied in the past, in line with health department guidelines. That is, the health department thinks male genital mutilation is okay. The health department in the Northern Territory is involved with male genital mutilation. They think it's okay. They bankroll it. They give them lots of materials, all the equipment necessary. It wouldn't be cheap either, I don't imagine. Nurses and doctors from the clinic have also attended previous ceremonies but were not present at last December's ritual. Well, we want that, if it must be done, it should be done safely and hygienically, shouldn't it? It should be done safely and hygienically if it must be done. I'm of the opinion that these sort of things should only be done with informed consent, meaning that the person should be 18 years old. They should be an adult. I don't think it should be done on minors. It was done to me as a minor. I was genitally mutilated, and I resent that. I've got a botched circumcision. I resent that. Some of the clinic's health professionals have told the ABC they were appalled by the genital injuries, by the injuries they saw. I say that should read appalled by the male genital mutilation injuries they saw. If these injuries were done to girls, they would have taken action. The people would have been prosecuted, possibly. They would have at least been accused of female genital mutilation if this was done to a girl. And, there would have been, there could have been legal ramifications. Some of the clinic's health professionals have told the ABC that were appalled by the injuries they saw, that is, I said, male genital mutilation injuries, but none are willing to speak for fear of dismissal. Investigators say injuries do not constitute child abuse. So, now I'll read that in my language. The investigators say male genital injuries do not constitute female child abuse. You see, the laws protect little girls, but they don't protect little boys. Little boys can sit in a pool of blood, a little girl, a pinprick of blood, and you're put away. Investigators say injuries do not constitute child abuse. That should read, investigators say male genital injuries do not constitute female child abuse. The Northern Territory government says it is aware of the case, and so far its investigators have found the injuries do not constitute child abuse. I'll just read that again. The Northern Territory government says it is aware of the case, and so far its investigators have found the male genital mutilation injuries do not constitute child abuse. Or you could say female child abuse. The Northern Territory Child Abuse Task Force received 2 notifications about the incident, leading to an investigation by 2 police officers and the Department of Children and Families. The Department of Children and Families. Now, in New South Wales, we have Prue Goward, who is the Minister for Family and Community Services, I think. She said there's one law for all Australians about genital mutilation, but there isn't. There isn't. There are 2 laws. You can genitally mutilate a boy, and you can't genitally mutilate a girl. There isn't one law for all Australians. There are 2 laws for all Australians. Prue Goward was telling fibs. But their inquiries found that the children had not been harmed as defined by the Care and Protection of Children Act. I'll just read that sentence again. But their inquiries found that the male children had not been harmed. Yes, had not been harmed. But they had been harmed. They were sitting there in a pool of blood. The penis had been cut on the wrong side, apparently. They had been harmed. It was botching. I say genital mutilation is harm. The department said it would continue to conduct inquiries into the well-being of the young men. They're saying young men here, they're under 18. One boy was 17. I don't know how old the others were. It said online on Wikipedia that, I think, yes, somewhere between 6 years and 10 years, I think, can be done, boys. Was it 10 years? I'm not sure. This is very interesting. Listen to the Northern Territory Attorney General John Elferink. He said any suggestion of child abuse was taken very seriously. that should really read, any suggestion of female child abuse was taken very seriously. We had boys sitting in a pool of blood, but no child abuse was found. If a little girl was sitting in a pool of blood, that would have been taken very seriously. It would have been considered a sex crime. You'd be put on the sex offenders register if it was a little girl, and you'd have charges laid against you for female genital mutilation, wouldn't you? You would. A more fulsome investigation was done in this instance because of the sensitivities involved, he said. Does that mean cultural sensitivities because it's indigenous? Well, there should be cultural sensitivity involved. But I say cultural sensitivity and sex discrimination are two different things. We can be culturally insensitive, apparently, about female genital mutilation. I mentioned Coptic Christian women, for example. I have a YouTube friend in Cairo, says the Coptic Christian women, some of them in Cairo, get female genital cutting done. Of course, we have Islamic women and whoever else does female genital cutting. So women who get female genital cutting have cultural sensitivity issues too. And Julia Gillard said there is no place in any religion or culture for female genital mutilation. So I mean, cultural sensitivity is one thing and sex discrimination is another. That's the point I'm making. I think we should be culturally sensitive, but if we're going to be culturally sensitive, we should be culturally sensitive to both genders. That's my view. So long as those practices don't amount to child abuse, there is no role for the state. It's called a free country. Well, yes, tell that to Eliza Broderick, yes. I mean, she talks about female genital mutilation, I'm sure, but she won't utter a word in defense of a boy's genital integrity. No role for the state. Prugard said there's one law for all Australians, didn't she? But of course, there's one law for female genital mutilation. There's one law for male genital mutilation. There's no cultural sensitivity real cultural sensitivity for female genital mutilation, but cultural sensitivity is considered okay for male genital mutilation. Now, this John Elferink has obviously been culturally sensitive as possible. He's saying that these practices don't amount to child abuse, but if they were females sitting in a pool of blood, he would be saying that was female child abuse. I'm sure he would be saying it was female child abuse, and he would be expected to say it was female child abuse of female children. He would be saying that. Northern Territory General John Elferink. No abuse was found to have occurred, and in the absence of that, and in the absence of criminality, it's a parental decision on how to bring up the kids. So it's okay to mutilate a boy. Even Eliza Broderick, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, will remain silent about this. It's okay to mutilate a boy. What he's saying is no female abuse was found to have occurred, no abuse of females. And genital cutting of boys, having a boy sitting in a pool of blood with a botched genital mutilation, is not considered child abuse. Mr. Elferink says he has lived and worked in remote communities and understands how traditional practices occur. He understands it's a traditional practice. But he believes there should always be checks for child abuse. What he's really saying, as far as I'm concerned, is there should always be checks for female child abuse. As I said, if there were little girls sitting in a pool of blood, he would be outraged. He would be. He'd be talking about genital mutilation, female genital mutilation. He'd be talking about sex crimes. He would be. There are a number of cultures that operate in the Northern Territory and even more Australia-wide. Islamic cultures, Christian cultures, Aboriginal cultures, other religions and other cultural practices, he said. Is he alluding to female genital mutilation there? He's trying to sound as if he is culturally sensitive, when indeed he wouldn't tolerate female genital mutilation for 1 minute. He wouldn't. So long as those practices don't amount to child abuse, I would insert female child abuse there. He's saying so long as those practices don't amount to child abuse, there is no role for the state. So long as those practices don't amount to criminality, there is no role of the state. It's called a free country, so you're free to genitally mutilate males. And Prugard said there's one law for all Australians. So, basically he's saying as long as it doesn't amount to female child abuse, you can have a boy sitting in a pool of blood with his dick cut on the wrong side and with a botched penis, and you can, there's no role for the state. There's no criminality, and yes, it's a free country, and a parent can do whatever they like to bring up their kids. That view about if it was applied to female genital mutilation wouldn't be acceptable. Elders say the ceremony is a critical step for young men. They're called young men here now instead of boys. The circumcision ceremony dates back thousands of years and is common practice in traditional and remote communities across northern Australia. Elders say the ceremony is a critical cultural step where boys become men. Yes, boys, well, it has to be decided, I suppose, whether they're underage or not. I'm all for adults doing whatever they like. They can slice themselves to bilio. The elders who supervise, yes, but I think children, I don't think it should be done without informed consent. Still, the 17-year-old boy was nearly grown up and big enough to make his mind up, I suppose. The elders who supervised the circumcision, was it a circumcision or a sub-incision, said the injuries were likely caused by a visiting family member who was still learning the ritual. I think that should read, said the male genital mutilation or the male genital injuries were likely caused. Yes. So when we talk about injuries, they're really, well, yes, they're not injuries, are they? They're not injuries unless they happen to a girl. They're not abuse unless it happens to a girl. I think someplace he make mistakes, someplace he don't, you know, said traditional Garawa elder Keith Rory. Mr. Rory said he had been conducting the ritual for 20 years. This ceremony is really strong. It goes back, way back to the old days when it first started, he said. People use different sort of stuff with young men. These days we get it from the clinic, but in those days they used stone and stuff and made it themselves. I remind you this article uses, sometimes call these people who had this genital cutting done, they're called young men. In other sections of this article, they're called boys. It is traditional stuff and it's sacred stuff. So it could be called secret men's business, but the pool of blood was no secret. Borroloo's former doctor, Dr. Peter Fitzpatrick, says it is not the first time young men have needed medical care after initiation. That is, male genital injury has occurred, yes, upon the underage. Young men, what he means is underaged. They're doing lots of young men, that's underaged minors, and it's a remote area, and I've seen and evacuated young men myself, he said. By young men, he means underaged minors, males. Dr. Fitzpatrick, whose own sons have been initiated, says with any surgical procedure, there are sometimes complications. Yes, well, those complications do include death. If we do a pinprick on a little girl and draw one drop of blood, I remind you, we will be sent to jail and will be put on the sex offenders register for life. These events occur in remote areas. They're not actually occurring within cooey of an accident and emergency department, and people live in remote areas. That increases the risk, he said. Yes, the risks include death, don't they? Yes, I think if you're going to give informed consent, you should know that you could die from it. Especially a child can't give informed consent. The ceremony is very, very important to Indigenous communities. Cultural sensitivity here, I don't doubt that it is important to Indigenous communities. No one's arguing about cultural sensitivity, but cultural sensitivity and sex discrimination matters are two different things. I'm here to talk about discrimination on grounds of gender. I'm not here to talk about cultural sensitivity. If I talk about cultural sensitivity, I say that we should be culturally sensitive to both genders. That is, if we allow male genital mutilation, we should also be allowing female genital mutilation, or if we ban female genital mutilation, we should also be banning male genital mutilation. Otherwise, to do otherwise is sex discrimination. It's very important to Indigenous communities, the ceremony, sacred to some. Yes, well, for Sunni Islamic women, they think that Allah wants them to have genital cutting. So it's sacred to them, that's sacred to them. Female genital mutilation is sacred to some, isn't it? It is. As long as there's some procedures and understanding and harm minimisation is there, then it's maybe at an acceptable level to the community. So, acceptable level to the community, which community is he talking about? Then he's referring to genital mutilation, and he says it may be at an acceptable level to the community. So it's acceptable to genitally mutilate a male, a sub-incision. Go to Wikipedia and look up sub-incision of the penis and see what it looks like. You'll know what it looks like. If you did that to a girl's clitoris, well, there'd be outrage, wouldn't there? There would be. At an acceptable level to the community. Well, apparently it's obvious. Male genital mutilation is acceptable to the community and female genital mutilation is not. The injured teenager has no regrets over the ritual. Bryce Miller has recovered from his injuries, I say his genital injuries, and says he has no regrets participating in this initiation into manhood. Well, he is nearly 18. He was old enough to know what he was doing and having done to him. He says he's recovered. I wonder if he hasn't got some neurological damage. I imagine he would have some hideous scarring to deal with, most probably. His grandfather, William, on the other hand, says no other family members will ever take part again. Others in the community, including Garrower man Gadrian Hooson, say the ceremony will continue. There's no point talking about our ceremony because that's not going to stop us from carrying that culture, he said. That culture is a genital cutting culture. We're going to carry it on. So, as I say, I believe in cultural sensitivity. If we're going to genitally mutilate, we do it to both genders. To do otherwise is sex discrimination. Or if we're going to ban female genital mutilation, we've got to ban male genital mutilation. Otherwise, we've got to reintroduce female genital mutilation. You can't have it both ways. You can't sit there as Sex Discrimination Commissioner, as Elizabeth Broderick does, and remain silent about boys sitting in a pool of blood while opening your mouth to say, female genital mutilation is wrong. I'm here to talk about sex discrimination, discrimination on grounds of gender. I do believe in cultural sensitivity. Cultural sensitivity is well and good. If we're going to be culturally sensitive, we have to be culturally sensitive to Islamics and whomever else wants to do genital cutting. It's all for everybody or it's not for everybody as far as I'm concerned. See ya.